All right. So for this, shall I call you Dr. Liz or do you prefer just Liz?
You can call me Liz.
Liz. Okay.
Everyone will know I'm a doctor. It doesn't matter.
Okay, great. Well, Liz, I'm so grateful that you're giving time to this and the women of Dream Lab who get to enjoy this and get to know you. I wish you lived closer or I lived
Oh,
closer
me
so
too.
that we could do this in person. But as all of them know, as I have just given them one of your products, and we'll get to have you tell part of that story later on today in this interview in a few minutes. But I think I just want to start with gratitude for sure. Gratitude that you're here today. Also, just how much I just appreciate your openness and your honesty. Like I scoured the internet for interviews you've done, and you've shared your story with me. You shared on your Instagram for Illuminate Life and all of that. Um, and and just I think the power of stories is so important. So I'm so appreciative that you're giving time for this today. Yeah.
Ah, It's my pleasure being here and connecting with you, connecting with your people. No, and I'd shared with you earlier, anything that I can say or do that would be of any value to any woman as they are in maybe the looking back and rewriting their story and looking into their future and making some changes, like anything I can do to help or inspire, or maybe just even if it's to prevent any of the mistakes I made along the way. And there are plenty that were done, and I'm sure plenty more speed bumps to go along, but that's part of the process. So it's all good.
Absolutely. Well, and I actually think that the context and how I came across you is really beautiful too. And it speaks to kind of an overarching, I was an accidental entrepreneur as well. I love that you shared that one of your interviews, but I was having fertility issues. I was working in corporate. I went and saw my acupuncturist who specialized in fertility acupuncture. She gave me one of your candles, which she was selling at her boutique there out front, like in the waiting room area. I read the back. I was like, oh my gosh, this is eco-friendly. Like the wax that, it's barware. You can use it after. It has these crystals, like all of these beautiful components. And then I started like following your story of entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship wasn't something I was thinking about at the time. And so now to come full circle to be like 5 years into entrepreneurship in
Yeah.
connection with you, just this happenstance of, right, this other person kind of connecting me to you and your work. And then to be able to, both you and I share such a love and a value for helping, I would say women, but anyone who wants to
All
step
right.
into what's next. And I just think that that's like life is always on time. So you played
Always.
kind of an important part in just opening me up to entrepreneurship,
Oh,
which is so
yeah. And I fully believe the universe has plans for us, and things only happen for reasons that maybe are not identifiable in the moment they're happening. But then years back, you're like, of course, it was all like meant to be. Everything happens for a reason. So I am looking forward to finding out what our reason is for connecting together, because I know there is one.
I love. Well, let's start with just your story. I think to be able to give some context for what occurred with let me just let you share. There was
Okay.
something very, very significant that happened for you in midlife that really changed the course of your professional
Sure.
trajectory.
Sure. So I was actually almost an accidental doctor as well. I was an anesthesiologist for 20 years. Grew up in a family where my father was a physician, his father was a
Mm.
physician, very much a doctor family. And I was the oldest, it was my youngest brother. And my brother was going to be the doctor. So growing up, I was getting all like the little Barbies and those doll heads that you would do the hair and things. And my brother got the medical kits. And I was not a person who set out to become a doctor. Again, things happening for a reason, but it was almost, now I know I went into medical school as even like a second career after I had graduated college, after I'd gotten married. It's like, I'm going to go to med school in seeking my father's approval. Like I didn't know it at the time, but that's why. So fast forward, I land in anesthesia. So I'm an anesthesiologist, and then divorced single mother. So while it provided stability and an income where I could support my children, it was not terribly fulfilling. There were moments, but it didn't bring me great joy. And in fact, it had gotten to the point, after doing it for over 20 years, I would drive into work just thinking, I've got 10 hours. I just have to get through 10 hours. And like waking up, the alarm clock goes off and it's like, let's go. And the stress and the catecholamines and all that pressure that you just live with. And I didn't really give much thought to, and never appreciated how just stressed and unhappy I was in doing it. I just did it. But I think because I was doing that, I was looking for other ways to bring me joy in my life. So for me, it was a lot of physical outlets, a lot of running, a lot of yoga, and just never listening to my body, still being this very type A person on the go, stressed out. I tore my hamstring doing some ridiculous yoga pose a woman of my age had no business doing. So in that period where I was literally forced by the universe to sit still, I was on a frozen water bottle, probably shoe shopping and feeling very sorry for myself on the computer, and a blog popped up. And I had never read a blog before, Sarah. In fact, I was like, who has time to read those blogs? Not me. But it was a blog on candle making. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Clicked on it because I had never once given any thought to the possibility of making a candle. I'd always loved them. My mom always had them around when I was a kid and would yell at me because I would stick my fingers like in the wax and make those little cups with them and pull on it. Like I was just drawn to candles always. Never even considered making them. But because I couldn't do anything for the next 4 months, because they were like, Liz, sit still and heal, or you're going to need surgery to repair this. I ordered a candle making kit that day on Amazon, like we do, and a little kitchen experiment started. And I truly fell in love with the science of it, the creativity of it. It was an outlet for a lot of things. And I kind of came up with this concept of a product I wanted, because when I started doing my research on how to make a candle, I was appalled at all the chemicals and toxins and all the bad things in the candles. But being a doctor, I also decided I wanted to make a candle that was healing and made you feel better in your sanctuary, both in your body and your mind. So I started with this kitchen experiment. It turned into like a small little business, but I kept doing anesthesia. And then as I was putting more time and effort into this business and decided, let's go for it. Let's really try to make a go of this. Still kept doing anesthesia, cut back a little bit on it. But again, I am a very stubborn person. The subtleties of the universe are wasted on me. Sometimes it takes a grand sweeping gesture for me to be like, yeah, this is the direction I need to go in, whether it's a marriage that is absolutely so terrible that you're forced to get out of it. And that was my first marriage. It was abusive, and it took getting really bad for me to leave. Again, no subtleties, has to be a big thing. So when I turned 50, and I am 54 now, I started developing pain in my hands doing anesthesia. It's a lot of, hand stuff, intubating, ventilating, all just the daily tasks. And I was like, oh, well, this is 50. This is 50. Kept on going, like my type A personality, stubborn self would do. Just, okay, take the Advil, do this, do this, do this. Eventually, became a parent. I had arthritis and some issues in my hands that would require surgery to fix the problem. And I, kind of put it off until there became the day that I couldn't do my job, had the surgery. It really takes sometimes the universe giving you this thing to do that. The surgery didn't go well. In fact, I now have had 3 surgeries on my one hand, and it actually disabled me from being able to practice anesthesia again. So in that recovery space, and there were, post-op complications and issues. I had shingles and developed chronic pain afterwards. And so it was a lot looking back.
Mm,
But it took that moment for me to realize this is not at all what I meant to be. And once I stepped away from the daily doing, I
mhm,
realized how unhappy I really had been in it. And
mhm.
that was like, okay, we're rewriting the whole story. We are moving forward and taking a new path, and it will all be okay. And the best thing I've ever done, really, other than having my children. I have to say that, but
Yes, always have to say that.
yeah,
I mean, what strikes me, and I hear this so often with entrepreneurs, because that's, I mean, there's no demographic that I am more committed and love serving than female entrepreneurs.
yeah.
And what I find is that for those of us who've had, I didn't have 20 years, I had 15 years in corporate experience, but it's like the tolerance level for just being, remaining,
Mhm.
discomfort, unhappiness, lack of fulfillment. It's like when that tolerance level kind of taps out and you're like, oh my gosh, then the universe gives you a couple sledgehammers across the head and you're
Oh,
like,
yeah,
okay, I am listening. So
exactly.
you listened. And
Yeah.
what happened from there when you came to peace with like, okay, anesthesiology is not my future.
That part was, I think, actually the easiest part of it all. And in telling my story, people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad. You're not a doctor anymore. It was so much work. It was so much work.
Mhm.
I was okay with moving on. I feel like I did that job. I did it very well. I miss some of the people I work with,
Mhm.
but I don't really miss that job. And in fact, have been given this huge opportunity. I really do feel like I can bring more healing and more wellness to more people than I ever could in practicing anesthesia. You know, how many thousands of people I put to sleep, like through 20 years. I can do that in, a couple months. Just light the candle, put a rollerball on, like sit and meditate, listen to the message that,
Mhm.
it's okay to rewrite your story. It's okay to make peace with the past, and be compassionate with yourself for the choices you made. That took me a little bit of time too, because,
Mhm.
sometimes like, oh, if I had done this, I wish I had done this sooner. I wish, because I'd always had this little creative spark. And, maybe if I had started things when I was younger, different, but that wasn't how it was going to be. And because of all the experience, I think whatever you're doing is flavored by that, and it only gets better. It's like soup is not good the first day or the second day. It's much better like, 3 days later. So if you extrapolate that into decades, it's just going to only get better the longer it sits and get more complex and rich.
I love that you're sharing that because there is such wisdom in like the time that's invested into
Yeah.
something. My experience, and it sounds like yours, is like the longer you're an entrepreneur, the more rich, fulfilling, wonderful,
Mhm.
lovely, fun it is.
Yeah.
um
Which is hard. It's really hard, especially if, you are somewhat of an overachiever, a chronic, like, check the boxes, do the tasks and move on. Like, hello, I'm still reforming that. And every now and again, I need to take a step back and be like, things will all happen as they're meant to happen. I'm on the path.
uh-huh.
That was probably the hardest thing, not even leaving the anesthesia,
Mhm.
just that. And then in learning something new, because stepping from being a doctor, and I joke, I'm like, yeah, I could save somebody's life, but I had no idea how to invoice anybody or do a purchase order or an inventory system or,
Uh-huh.
marketing, networking, none of that. But that was challenging and it's such an opportunity for growth. And there was so much to learn that was really exciting.
Mhm.
Although in that space, so many times did I feel like doubt or like, what do I know? I don't know any of this. And especially going to some of those shows that I did early on, I'm like, I don't belong here. Like, just sort of
Mm.
that fear and doubt kind of creeping up. And then you just, okay, it's just going to do what we can do and build the confidence. And gradually it all comes. Yeah.
It does. And but experience, like I was
Mhm.
reading one of your interviews. What was this one
Oh,
from? The
uh-oh.
shout out, no, the shout out LA one.
Okay.
And you wrote so beautifully about like you didn't know what a SKU was, what a PO was, how to send an invoice, but you got clients. Like you emailed 100 local, right, to you spas, wellness centers, and people were like, "Yeah, we're in." And you're like, "Oh, how do I do this?"
Yeah.
Oh, you know.
Sometimes I wish, and it's funny, I'm working with somebody also to like teach other entrepreneurs like how to scale from like your kitchen to like the next level, because you may have this brilliant idea, but it's hard and you don't really know where to start. Um, and for some reason, I had a vision of what I wanted to create. I don't recommend everybody does this. I kind of started at the end and worked my way back,
Mhm.
like, okay, this is what I want. This is where we're going. This is the product. And then I'm like, okay, well, what do I need to do to get there? And maybe that's just how my mind works. You should have some things in place first, like, lock up your domain and have some
Uh-huh.
proof of concept and have an accounting system. Some of those things maybe would have been helpful. But in asking for help, so many
Mhm.
people want to share valuable information because we're all always trying to learn from each other. And no question is a stupid question. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, there's so many things that I love about, your story. And I think it's so key that, especially the women watching this know, like, there's no one right way to do it. I
Oh,
quit my job and went immediately into entrepreneurship. That's not for everyone, right? You were kind of
yeah.
led out of a career and then opted into something new. Some
Yeah.
people stay with a full-time job or a part-time job while they're building, and maybe they start from the beginning and work their way to the end result. You worked it kind of backwards, and
Right.
so it's like there's no one right way to do it. The two things that I really wanted to hit on before I have you share about this transformation candle is, one, I think it is so gracious of life to have given you the opportunity to, you shared with me on a call earlier a while ago, like that you were in medicine, which is helping people who are already sick, and now you're in medicine, right, and
Mhm.
and health, helping to prevent, right, sickness and illness.
Ah,
And that's such a beautiful, and I think such a wise and insightful thing to see. And you have this beautiful quote on your website, which is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I think it's so powerful because choosing is such a powerful thing to do. Like, choosing immediately puts you in the driver's seat of life.
yeah.
Choosing immediately gives you gives you your power, right? Your self-esteem.
Yeah.
And the quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson is, quote, "The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." And I see that in your story, and I see that in my story. I see that in
Right.
entrepreneur stories. Like, there comes a moment where you decide there's no ideal time. Now is it. I'm closing the exit doors. Like, I'm committed to learning the on the job training that entrepreneurship is.
Right. Right.
Um,
Well, and like a belief is really just a thought, like you continuously have over and over and over again.
yes.
And we as humans, as women, um, you can control your thoughts. You really can.
Yes.
How do you choose to think about your day? Are you going to make it a positive experience? You're going to have happy thoughts. Is everything going to be like doom and gloom and oh, woe is me and I can't, I can't, I can't?
Yeah.
Then guess what? You're not going to be able to. So you really can control where you want to land to
Yes.
some extent through your thoughts and through the decisions you make based on those. So I am a firm believer that that's how you control where you want to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to get to the story of this transform candle. So in like a 2 or 3 minute capture, can you give the overview of how this came to
Sure.
be? Because it's miraculous and wonderful.
It's like, again, I would say it's serendipity, but things happen for a reason. So it's not. So my first busy year of doing Illuminate Life, and I was by myself, I had no help. So I was in, I call it the sweatshop because no labor laws applied at the time, but working nights, weekends. And I would listen to podcasts. And I stumbled across this podcast with, it was the Sherry and Nancy show, Sherry Salata and her friend Nancy. It's great. The reruns are still back there. And it was sort of about rewriting your story. And Sherry had recently written a book and da 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 da. And I had never heard of Sherry Salata before. It turns out she was a producer in the Oprah Winfrey show and then became the president of Oprah Network. She was the EP and had worked her way up from being like nothing there. Her story is fascinating. Her book, The Beautiful No, is worth a read for anybody who wants to reinvent their life. In listening to that, and I was like, huh, if I could just get my candles into Sherry's hands, I know she would love them because she would talk about, like candles setting the mood and just being a sensory heightening experience and how much she loved having like a signature scent around. I'm like, I know she would love these. Fast forward, so she was kind of on my radar. One of these Facebook things pops up, a 5-day, write your story life kind of thing, do the free 5-day thing, you sign up, and then it's a course. So I did a course with her. It was a 12-week thing, and it was fabulous. It was great. Then she offered a retreat. That was in January, the following October, it was a retreat in Italy. And again, it was just deepening your experiences and living your best life. And so many like beautiful messages came out of that. I go to this retreat and I brought a candle. Like when I paid my last deposit on the check, I sent like a candle to her. It's the first time a candle was in her hands. She and her assistant showed up with one of the candles and we used it for ceremonial purposes when we were in Umbria in this Italian retreat, and then a burn ceremony at the end. And we were talking about the candle. And at the time I was at a little bit of a crossroads too, and had expressed to her, I'm like, do I just want to do this business? Because I also want to share my message, much like I'm doing with you here today. And so I do want to do that with women. And I was kind of branching out to my own podcast and sharing my story. But I was like, Sherry said to me, Liz, you light up when you talk about the candles. And she said, you're spreading yourself too thin. Focus right now on what's bringing you joy. And that's it. She's like, just go there and the rest will follow. And, she had gone on to say, she's like, I see like in you, what is me? Like I hit one mark and then I like, let's do more, let's do more, let's do more, rather than expand and grow where you are. Like sometimes the power is there rather than spreading out. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And then I said to her, I said, Sherry, I wanted to give everybody a candle. I gave them little candles, the gals on the trip. Said, I wanted to do one especially for this retreat. And she's like, well, you can do that. I said, well, yeah, like I blend all my own scents. The whole thing is like my like design, I made this all up as I've gone along. I said, yeah, I absolutely create different scents. And she was like, transformation. I said, I can make a transformation because that's really what this course was about, was transforming your life. I said, yeah, I can do transformation. So she and I worked to co-create like this scent and this brand. And that's where this came from. And I said to her, once we had nailed down the final scent that we like agreed upon, I sent her like 4 versions. And she's like, that's it. Can we do a whole line? I said, absolutely, Sherry. Salata, let's make a whole line of products and we'll call it transformation. And they are now in existence on both our websites, hers and mine. But I said, I could not have done this. I could not have blended or created this candle and the line that came after had I not been to Italy and had that transformative experience with you and the other women in this co-creative space. It's like, it just it grew out of there, because
Mm,
it's, the memory, the feeling, the emotions that came from that all gets poured into basically the fragrance when you're making the candle. And
yeah.
she was like, yeah, you could not have done that before. So, things do happen. And I haven't even told her that story yet, that I had this like kind of vision and like manifestation, if you will, like if I could just get a candle into her hands,
Hmm.
it will be shared. It
Hmm.
will be shared like on her platform, which, is way bigger than mine. But yeah, it just happened. So
What first off, I love that you literally packaged transformation and now you sell it, right? Which is great. And that we all get to share
yeah.
in receiving this candle and getting to be part of this bigger narrative of women saying yes to life, women choosing into transformation,
Mhm.
right? And on a practical level, like this piece of hand poured, right? Can like piece of you that we all
Yeah.
get to take into our own life and continue to be inspired by. So I'm so grateful you shared that. I think that the backstory is so um, I'm gonna say inspiring, but that doesn't even feel like it really touches. Like it's so deeply meaningful. And I think what so many people do is that they put the cart before the horse. Like, I need to have a contract like that with Oprah's former producer, right?
Right.
It before I start making candles. And it's just ways that we can put barriers in front of ourselves. Like, here are the things
Oh
that
yeah.
I need a manufacturing space. You
Mhm.
started in your kitchen and then it moved to the basement. And I don't know if it's still there.
Oh, it's still in
So,
the basement. I'm still searching, but
right.
that's okay. It will
And yet
happen
you're
as it's meant to
making,
happen.
yes,
Yeah.
you're making the money that you want, you're
Mhm.
happy, you have staff who are fully capable. Like, you didn't start with all of that, and you didn't have
No.
certain prerequisites that you're like, when this happens, then I'll be ready. You
Yeah.
just said yes, and then life is unfolded for you and given you so many different opportunities and relationships like this with this candle. That I think it's just such evidence of like life is always leading us, life is always taking care of us. And I think that one of the things I just truly, genuinely so appreciate about you, Liz, is that you are aware that you're not the only one creating in your business, right? That
Right.
there's this other universal life force, love, God, whatever you want to call it, that is your partner. And that's really, you're part of the equation, but there's this whole other part
Oh,
of the
yeah.
equation that makes the magic happen, like, right, this
Yeah.
retreat and this candle experience.
Well,
And
and
I
you
think that,
just said it. You just said it. You're like, when you say yes, and so often we're putting up the
yeah.
roadblocks and the I can't, not yet, I'm not ready. But when you say yes and let it be easy, then everything comes. Like everything is possible.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Well, and it speaks so much to your willingness. I think, right, our willingness to be teachable, to learn as we go, to say, I'm still learning today, is a really key part to like collaborating with life to create even more goodness and service in the world. So thank you so much, Liz, for taking this time. I had some other questions that I wanted to ask too, but we will have to do that another time.
We'll do part
Um,
two. I just enjoy talking.
I know I could
Enjoy
talk to you
talking with
for hours.
you.
Um, so where can people find more about you? I know that you're doing some support for midlife reinvention and then also Illuminate Life. How can people be connected to you, find out more about you, your story, and your products?
Best way to find me and products is illuminatelife.com. On our website, we've got all kinds of, you know, FAQs and a little about page and all the links to social because I'm always putting stuff on there too. Probably the best way to find me is there. So
Okay,
yeah,
perfect. Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing this time. And I hope to have you back soon. And I'll
I
end
look
the recording now and we can finish our
look
time
forward.
together.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
anytime you want me back, it's fun.
great.